Ta-dang! We are live now. YouTubers, Zoomers are all ready to study. More and more Zoomers are coming in. YouTubers, you also join us. We have literary criticism today. Are you ready, guys? Literary criticism. Okay. So, guys, today we have to start from the very beginning. Today we start from Plato, Aristotle, because it is criticism. Shall I share my screen? This is my screen. Can you see my screen, everybody? I hope you can see my screen. Yes. Now, Unit 8, Literary Criticism. Are you ready, guys? Today is day 11. Okay, I just ran and got my phone because YouTubers are on the phone, in the phone, right? So, guys, ta-da-dang, we have to start from ancient criticism. As you know, literary criticism is as old as literature itself. Literary criticism started in the BCs with Roman classicism, before that Greek classicism. We have Plato and Aristotle. Everybody knows all this. This is how we start our BA, MA classes, isn't it? And when we talk about Plato and Aristotle, we talk about the two-tiered metaphysics. We talk about the world of forms. We talk about the world of ideal reality. Plato was an idealist. Aristotle was a realist. Plato believed that there is an ideal of everything beyond the real. Beyond the real, there is the ideal of everything. That ideal is important. Aristotle was a realist. We all know all these things. And also, in Plato's Republic, he talked about the ideal city-state. Plato also wrote Iron, Phaedrus, Apology. In net exam, apart from the usual points, they will ask you some other minute points. They will expect you to read at least a detailed summary of Republic and also Poetics. They will expect you to know the details of what is Plato's Academy, what happened there, you know, what was the conception of philosophy, what was the conception of poetry. Such details they will ask. And also Plato's concept of forms, Plato's concept of idealism. Okay, the allegory of the cave is very important in this regard. I'm just reminding you of a lot of things. The allegory of the cave is a metaphor for education. Remember, there are also other allegories that Plato talked about, like the allegory of the sun, the allegory of the divided line. Plato, in the last book of Republic, 10th book, he wanted poets to be banished from the Republic. Plato's view of art was refuted by Aristotle. Aristotle said that art is not bad. Art does not corrupt you. Art is good. Art is necessary because art leads to a better society through catharsis. I'm just reminding you, I know that many of you know these things. And also, Aristotle developed a theory of tragedy. He developed a definition of tragedy. He believed that, like Plato, he agreed in the concept of mimesis or imitation. Tragedy is the imitation of an action. Tragedy is the imitation or mimesis of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude. Remember this definition? In language embellished with each kind of artistic ornaments. The several kinds being found in separate parts of the play. He talked about the different parts of a play in the form of action, not of narration. And it should effect pity and fear, the purgation of these emotions through pity and fear. He talked about 6 constituent elements of tragedy, starting with mythos or plot. And plot should result from character, and character should be known through thought. Thought should be expressed in diction. Diction should be embellished by song. Last but not the least, there should be spectacle. And the 6 elements of tragedy led to the Freytag's pyramid, beginning, middle, end. Tragedy should have a beginning, middle, and end. That idea is later called Freytag's pyramid. All this you remember? And Aristotle casually mentioned unity of action. He also just suggested unity of time. He did not talk about unity of place. That was added by Renaissance critics. These 3 unities became very important in the Renaissance period. There is the simple plot and the complex plot. Apart from the 3 unities, he talked about peripetia and anagnorisis. A perfect tragedy, for example, is Oedipus Rex or Oedipus Tyrannus. He talked about Oedipus Rex or Oedipus Tyrannus as a perfect tragedy. It has dramatic irony. It has the perfect kind of character. What is that kind of character? A man with a noble beginning, a noble status. Upon his action, the fate of the community will depend. And also, he should have an air of judgment or hamartia. That is the tragic hero. And a tragedy should be superior to an epic. All these classical ideas of tragedy became very popular in Europe afterwards. Aristotle's theories laid the foundations of the theories of Horace. There were Neo-Aristotelians in Italy during the Renaissance. The Neo-Aristotelians inspired English critics like Sidney. Are you getting me, guys? The English critics like Sidney were inspired by the Neo-Aristotelians. After the ancient period, there is actually the medieval period. Before we talk about the Renaissance or the modern period, we have to talk about the medieval period. But before the medieval period, there was the Hellenistic period in Greece. Before that, Roman period. In Greek period, there were Plato and Aristotle. In Roman classical period, there was Horace. I mentioned that Horace's Ars Poetica is modeled on Aristotle. And in the Hellenistic period, there is Longinus. Longinus is the author of On the Sublime. On the Sublime talks about great style, grand style or great style. And sublimity is associated with a feeling of vastness, a kind of unity with divinity, a sense of divinity. You should identify with the divine. You should know that the human being is limited. That is true sublime. Longinus talked about the sources of the sublime. There are 5 sources of the sublime. They are thought, grandeur of thought, vehement of passion, then appropriate diction, appropriate use of figures of speech or schemata, and lastly, dignified composition. I am remembering like this because I studied with codes, and those codes are firmly rooted in my mind. When I speak, I get it in the correct order because of the codes with which I studied. You should also study like that with codes so that you will also remember. And in the end of the classical period, there are the Neo-Platonists. Neo-Platonists like Plotinus. They are also very important. Neo-Platonists like Plotinus, Macrobius, Boethius, which is like the Bible of literary criticism. M.A.R. Habib's book. M.A.R. Habib's big book. It is largely philosophy. It is not fully literary criticism. But even then, you should have a copy. You should look at it as much as possible. You should read it. This book. I have it right in front of me so that I can show it to you. Everybody knows this book, I hope. Otherwise, you should know now. A history of literary criticism. That is a classic. And then, who are the medieval critics that you should know about? Very important, Saint Augustine. Even though they may not ask you Saint Augustine's criticism, remember, Saint Augustine is important in texts like Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Also, The Wasteland. Saint Augustine is important in modern works. He is alluded to in modern works. So, what did Saint Augustine say? What are his important books? City of God, Confessions. At least these basic things we should know. And when they ask basic things in the exam, you should be able to answer. Did you understand? Study thoroughly. Do your own research. Those who have attended our criticism and theory course have got exhaustive PDF about all this. We have a criticism and theory course from last year. It was only 1,000 rupees. Everything in criticism and theory, I have given PDF and taught for just 1,000 rupees. It is actually worth 10,000 rupees minimum. Many of you attended it. And you've got that PDF. You can contact our office if you still want to attend that course. It is still going on, I think. And that is like the cheapest and most comprehensive course in literary criticism and theory, I would say. People could not take it because it was so much. They were finding it very difficult to follow. But it is eternally useful, lifetime. Okay, don't worry. New students also will get all this. Don't worry. Now, I am coming back to medieval criticism. In medieval period, there are many important figures. I was talking about Saint Augustine. Then we have Quintilian. We have Christine de Pizan. I think Matthew Arnold, many people have talked about Virginia Woolf. Talked about Christine de Pizan. Then there are people like writers like St. Thomas Aquinas. He's also a philosopher. And St. Thomas Aquinas is also important in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Then Dante Alighieri. Even though we know Dante as a literary figure, a lot of criticism is associated with Dante. Quintilian, bust I have put here in the slide. And listen to me, guys. There are also Arab philosophers. Arab philosophers like Averroes, Avicenna. They were greatly influential on Renaissance criticism. Will you remember, everybody? In many syllabi for assistant professor exams, etc., Quintilian and such medieval philosophers are also prescribed. In central universities, they expect you to know all these things. So, in NET exam, they will ask. This is how it is. Did you understand? So, don't take it lightly. One question, if it comes from medieval criticism, and if you get it right, many people may go wrong there, but you will be at an advantage. Will you remember, guys? It is very, very important. In the medieval period, there were also figures like Minturno, Scaliger, Castelvetro. Why are they important? Because many Renaissance figures like Sidney were inspired. Minturno, Scaliger, Castelvetro, Pierre de Ronsard. Even though when you first look at M.A.R. Habib, these look like strange names we never heard before. They are actually not strange. When you study Sidney or Arnold or modernism, etc., deeply, these names will come there. When you study in a deep manner, these names will come there. And then you will understand when they ask in NET, this is where they're asking from. Suddenly, so many difficult questions in NET are actually basics according to Central University syllabi, or when you study deeply, they are basics. I am not going into these authors in detail. I will go into only the main authors in detail. I don't want to pressurize everybody, but I want to tell you tonight and tomorrow, take down all these names and at least look up a little bit. It will help you in the exam. So once again, Minturno, Scaliger, Castelvetro, Torquato Tasso. Remember Tasso, who wrote Jerusalem Delivered? Tasso's book was the source for Fairy Queen. Then I said Pierre de Ronsard. He was a French critic. Slowly, we should study all these people. They're all important. When you become scholars, which is what NTA wants you to become, you will know all these people. Okay? And then Renaissance criticism. The most important figure is Philip Sidney. The other day when we did non-fiction, we talked about Thomas Wilson, Thomas Watson. We talked about John Check. We talked about Roger Ascham. All of them were critics. Then there is George Gascoigne, George Puttenham. George Puttenham's The Art of English Poesy, for example, is very famous. You already know that Sidney's School of Abuse was written in reply to Sidney's Apology for Poetry was written in reply to School of Abuse. Don't you know that? The School of Abuse is also very important. It is a Renaissance attack on poetry. It attacks poetry. Henna, guys? So, in this period, in the Renaissance period, there were many important figures. And let me tell you more details. I hope you have a book or a paper with you. Are you ready to take down? What did George Gascoigne write? George Gascoigne wrote certain notes of instruction. George Gascoigne wrote certain notes of instruction concerning the making of verse or rhyme in English. Thomas Lodge wrote Defense of Poetry, Music and Stage Plays. George Puttenham, I said, wrote The Art of English Poesy. William Webb is there. William Webb wrote Discourse of English Poetry. Please take down and study, guys. Normally, coaching center people will only say, if you want to attend my classes and everything here, they won't say also. Now I'm reminding you, study on your own. You don't have to really stress so much to prepare for NETs. I will teach you all this in detail in the paid course, of course. But even otherwise, you can do self-learning. Roger Ascham is very important. He wrote Toxophilus, the Schoolmaster. Thomas Wilson wrote The Art of Rhetoric. Thomas Wilson, The Art of Rhetoric. Thomas Campion wrote Observations on the Art of English Poesy. Thomas Campion. Samuel Daniel wrote A Defense of Rhyme. And then there are two people in the Renaissance period that you know very well. Francis Bacon and Ben Jonson. If you don't know, remember Francis Bacon in his essays, Advancement of Learning, etc. He brought out a lot of new ideas. Ben Jonson also, Timber or Discoveries Made Upon Men and Matter. In Timber or Discoveries, remember guys, there is a section on Shakespeare called De Shakespeare Nostrat. In Timber or Discoveries, there is a section called De Shakespeare Nostrat. He said a lot of things about Shakespeare, Ben Jonson. And Ben Jonson also wrote Dedication of Walpole, Conversations with Drummond. Important works where he talked about the ideal poet. He, like Sidney said, the poet is a maker or feigner. He talked about ideal style. So many things. Ben Jonson also talked about Bacon. So I said a lot of things I know. There is the prologue to Every Man in His Humor, which is like the manifesto of Ben Jonson's theories. The prologue to Every Man in His Humor. It talks about comedy of humors. So I'm just giving you a quick tour through all these important writers and their works. Don't stress. If you can't remember, it's okay. You can always watch the video again, do your own reading and research. Otherwise, if you are my students, you will get everything, all these PPTs and everything you will get in detail. Every time I update my PPTs also, I make it more and more understandable and easy. So don't worry, I'm there. Okay, so I am quickly going through. If you did not get it, just watch the video one more time. All right, guys. Now there is neoclassical criticism. What is neoclassical criticism? Neoclassical criticism means criticism that talks about neoclassicism. Neoclassicism is a lot of traditional classical methods and values plus some native methods. This is John Dryden, you see here. John Dryden employed classical values and methods. At the same time, he also admired and appreciated English styles. That is why it is called neoclassicism. Isn't it? John Dryden is called the father of neoclassicism or the father of neoclassical criticism. He was a liberal neoclassicist. But before that, Ben Jonson also was a neoclassicist. Neoclassicists gave importance to wit and common sense. Isn't it? And neoclassicists were closely associated with Enlightenment philosophers. Enlightenment also I will talk about. And remembered John Dryden's important principles of neoclassicism. John Dryden wrote in every genre possible. He wrote poetry, then drama, then critical prose. And he wrote comparative criticism, liberal neoclassicism. He did not slavishly adhered to rules. He even went against Aristotle. He wrote important critical essays like Of Dramatic Poesy and Preface to the Fables. In Of Dramatic Poesy, it is in the form of a conversation between Eugenius, Crites, Lycidius, and Neander. Neander represents Dryden. And then Preface to the Fables is an appreciation of Chaucer. Do you remember, guys? Of Dramatic Poesy, 1668. Of Dramatic Poesy gave importance to a discussion. First to speak is Crites. Crites is supporting the classical masters. Then Eugenius speaks. Eugenius favors the moderns. Then Lycidius speaks. Lycidius favors the French. Then Neander speaks. Neander favors the contemporary English. Do you remember all this, guys? Neander defends rhyme. Neander supports tragicomedy. Neoclassical criticism also includes Addison, Pope, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson was actually a strict critic, but Dr. Johnson turns out to be a liberal critic, where in Preface to Shakespeare. Dr. Johnson's Preface to Shakespeare is very important, but that is not his only critical work. He was a pioneer of biographical criticism. He wrote Lives of the Poets. It's actually criticism. Are you feeling bored, YouTubers and Zoomers? Because I am blah, 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 blah talking. There is so much to cover. I thought I will just lecture. If I ask you questions, many things I may not be able to speak. I hope you don't mind. I hope you're enjoying. I'm trying to make it like a story. Don't feel stressed. Just listen. If you don't remember everything, it's okay. Okay, guys? Right. Okay, so I was talking about Lives of the Poets. And in Lives of the Poets, he famously defined poetry. Poetry is the art of uniting pleasure with truth by calling imagination to the help of reason. And in Preface to Shakespeare, he defends tragicomedy and violation of unities. Dr. Johnson wrote many rambler essays, where also he emerges as a critic. Even in Rasselas, the Prince of Abyssinia, that is his prose work, Rasselas, the Prince of Abyssinia, even there is neoclassicism. Imlac is a neoclassical critic there. In France at this time, neoclassicism was spearheaded by critics like Corneille. Corneille was a playwright. Corneille wrote Les Cid, the play, famous play. Then Boileau, Nicolas Boileau Desprez. What did Boileau write? Les Lutrines. Those who are new in YouTube, I have already given PPTs with all these things in Vallath's Test public group. Jao, Vallath's Test public group में वो वहां होगा files tab होगा ना. Go there and take all the PDF there and study. Many people are also immorally selling my PDF and all that. What is free, they are cheating other people and selling. And what I'm giving paid students, some of the paid students are selling. Don't do that. It is like cheating other students also, because when you attend my classes, what you get is not just information. What you get is methodology, how to study. I empower you in so many ways. You know, that you don't get if you sell my PDF. Also, when people sell my PDF, they are only selling part of it, incomplete. So it is so bad what they are doing. Not only are they cheating me, they are cheating others also. I'm just telling you this. Now, neoclassical criticism also includes Addison, Afraben, Samuel Johnson, I already said, Cornell, Boileau. So many important critics are there. About them, we should know at least a little bit. Even if we don't know everything, at least a little bit we should know. You know why? Because these people inspired other people. Matthew Arnold and other classical critics like T.S. Eliot, etc., were inspired by all these French classicists, etc. So it's very important to know. Okay? And then the Enlightenment. Whose picture have I put here? I have put the picture of John Locke. The Enlightenment was a very inspiring philosophical movement. And the Enlightenment led to American Revolution, French Revolution, John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, Addison and Steele, Guillaume Battista Vico. Guillaume Battista Vico, recently they asked about him in net. He was not just a prose writer, he was a pioneering critic. Remember the novel Possession by A.S. Byatt? A.S. Byatt's Booker Prize winning novel Possession, remember? There, a researcher is reading Guillaume Battista Vico's book. And inside that book, he is finding some letters. Randolph Henry Ashe was a Victorian poet. Randolph Henry Ashe's letters, Roland Michel is finding in the book, in a book by Guillaume Battista Vico. Will you remember? Guillaume Battista Vico. Recently they asked in that some question. Edmund Burke was a critic also. Edmund Burke wrote ideas, a philosophy of the origin of our ideas of the sublime and the beautiful, where Edmund Burke talked about sublimity of terror. Edmund Burke was not only just a politician who gave a speech in India. He was a philosopher. He was a conservative philosopher. He was a critic. Did you understand? And Mary Wollstonecraft was there during Enlightenment. She started feminism with her book, Vindication of the Rights of Women. So many important figures in Enlightenment are there. Enlightenment criticism is very important. And Enlightenment criticism is related to Neoclassical criticism. Enlightenment was spearheaded by philosophers in Germany and France. Enlightenment philosophers who inspired these critics are Immanuel Kant, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, Denis Diderot, then Montesquieu, Voltaire and Rousseau. All these are Enlightenment philosophers. And they inspired literary criticism. Questions will come from these writers. Guillaume Battista Vico, Denis Diderot, Voltaire and Rousseau, Immanuel Kant. So many questions will not come. One question will come. Will you remember to look up? Very important. Okay, guys. Next is Romantic criticism. Romantic criticism, luckily, is easy. It is easier. We know Wordsworth and Coleridge in England. Wordsworth and Coleridge are not the only Romantic critics. There were also German Romantic critics, French Romantic critics. Did you know that, guys? German Romantic critics like Schiller, Schleiermacher, Schelling, all of them inspired Coleridge. Schlegel, Schiller first, then Schlegel, Schleiermacher, Schelling. I don't know what is wrong with these Germans. Everybody's name begins with sh. If I was born in Germany in the 18th century, My name would have been Kalyani Vallath. Their surnames all begin with Sh. Now, Romanticism is about, as all of you know, nature. Romanticism is about subjectivity, spontaneity, spontaneous expression. Romanticism is about primitive forms of society, origins of society. Romanticism gives importance to the individual and his potential. Romanticism thinks of the human being as noble, savage, as good. Did you understand? Whereas neoclassical criticism seeks to correct the human being. Neoclassical criticism wants to correct the human being, whereas romantic criticism thinks that the human being is always right. Did you understand, guys? And romantic criticism is about sublime. Romantic criticism is about imagination, freedom. Romantic criticism is connected to national philosophical concepts of freedom. Romanticism is inspired by American Revolution and French Revolution. Will you remember, guys? So these German philosophers, revolutions, all these inspired William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth wrote Preface to Lyrical Ballads in a rudimentary form in 1800 and in an elaborate form in 1802. Poetry is the breath and finer spirit of all knowledge. It is the impassioned expression which is in the countenance of all science. Isn't that the famous definition of poetry by William Wordsworth? Wow, that is a very famous definition. Poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings that result from emotions recollected in tranquility. First, you observe daffodils. Then at home, you go and emotions are recollected in tranquility. At that time, there is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And all this results in poetry. That is his theory, isn't it? And also, Preface to Lyrical Ballads is in the form of a defense of his theory, that poetry should be written in humble, written about, the subject matter should be humble, rustic life. And also, the language of poetry should be very simple, conversational. Poetry should show the struggles of ordinary people using simple language and diction. And poetry should stress on emotion and passion. All these are important ideas in romantic criticism. But these ideas were developed by Coleridge even further. In Coleridge, there is the theory of imagination. The theory of imagination developed by Coleridge. Now, Preface to Lyrical Ballads is not the only essay by Wordsworth. He has also written essay supplementary to the preface in 1815. So no, if you are a beginner, for God's sake, don't get stressed. And don't run away also. I don't want to hear all this. She's teaching too much. I'm getting stressed. Arey bacche thode hain aap log. You are not small children. You are adults, you are teachers, you are doing BA or MA, or you are already working. Kabhi kabhi to sunna padta hai sab kuch, hai na? You have to listen to all this at some point. You have to increasingly more and more get familiar. Slowly, everything you will remember. So don't get stressed if you are a beginner. Okay? So it is like you go to the sari shop to buy one sari. And don't say, I saw all the saris and got stressed, so I don't want to remain here, I want to run away. Will you say that? Or will you enjoy looking at all the saris and then buy one sari that you like? Tell me the truth. If I give you a feast and if I give you everything suddenly in 1 hour, why are you stressed? Remember, it is like going to a sari shop and saying, I am so stressed, I don't want to buy any sari, let me run away. Suppose I am going to give you a feast. I take you to a buffet party, okay? I suppose I take you to a buffet party. You see all the dishes there in the buffet party. You can eat only one person's meal. You cannot eat all this. If you eat all this, you will get indigestion. But isn't it wonderful to look at all this, to know, oh, wow, I have so much to eat, and then whatever you want, you eat. Or without eating, will you run away? Saying, she showed me so much food, I don't know what to eat. I got so stressed, so I ran away without eating anything. आप लोग ऐसे हैं तो it is better to run away. Run away, I don't mind. हाँ, it is better you run away without eating. See, you shouldn't be like small children. Okay, even small children are wiser than this. So enjoy all this. This is like a tour. You can see everything. It is like you go to some big city. I'm taking you to New York for one day or 1 week. You can see all New York. Will you run away saying first day itself, saying I got so stressed because none of these buildings belongs to me. I don't have a house here in New York, so let me run away without seeing anything. Will you run away? Or will you just see New York and go back to your small house in India? What will you do? I can give you 1,000 examples to prove that you should enjoy a crash course. All these things you know what to do, except crash course. Crash course, you will run away. But you will not run away from New York. You will not run away from buffet party. You will not run away from clothes shop, sari shop, jewelry shop. You go to buy one small nose pin for 500 rupees. But you look at all the jewels that cost lakhs of rupees, crores of rupees, diamonds and all that. You like seeing, right? Even though you are buying only 500 rupees nose pin. Okay, so we have decided, everybody, we are enjoying the crash course. Okay, don't worry, thinking I don't have crores of rupees to buy all this jewelry. Who asked you to buy everything now? Just enjoy. Slowly, slowly, we can make money. One by one, we can buy all the jewelry, okay? Don't get stressed. Yes. Now, everybody's energy is back, isn't it? Everybody's energy is back. Until now, you were thinking, oh my God, Renaissance criticism, Neoclassical criticism, Enlightenment, romantic, oh my God, my head is, breaking. I don't know where to look. I don't know what to listen to. This is how you were thinking, right? Now energy is back. Arey, you are such bache. Within 1 second, I can bring your energy back. You are like my Cleo, I think. Cleo is like that. 1 minute, she is so tired and sleeping. Oh, you will feel like she is going to sleep for 5 hours now. But next 5 minutes later, you look and she is jumping and pulling everything and overturning my table and causing all the trouble. In 2 minutes, her sleep is over and energy is back. You are also like that. All of you are my Cleos. Okay. No, jokes apart. No time for joking. Very serious crash course is going on. Why are you all laughing? Serious crash course is going on. Okay. Okay. Victorian criticism. Arey baap re. Victorian. Arey, I did not talk about romantic criticism. Imagination. 2 minutes doge mujhe? 2 minutes. I will talk about imagination. S.T. Coleridge developed the theory of imagination. in chapter 13 of Biographia Literaria, published in 1817. And that is not the only critical work that he wrote. He wrote lectures on Shakespeare and other poets and other works. He said that there are two things, fancy and imagination. Fancy deals with fixities and definites. There is nothing very creative about it. Fancy deals with fixed things, fixities and definites. Okay, I have this color sari, I have this color blouse. I just wear this sari with this blouse. I never wore this sari with this blouse before. I always wore brick color or white or some other color. First time I am wearing this sari, this blouse and this pendant. First time in my life. But this is only fancy. Already fixities are there. Blouses there, sari is there. You are just combining. There is nothing creative about it. But look at the person who made this pendant. The person who made this is really creative. What did she do? She looked at a design. Already design was there. She looked at the design. She drew the design and she made it with terracotta. It can be primary imagination, but when it becomes more and more creative, when she puts some new thing into it, it becomes secondary imagination. If you are copying from another design and making exactly the same thing, like you follow a recipe and make sambar exactly like that, then it is primary imagination. But if you are creating your recipe, you are making your own dish from your own head, then that is secondary imagination. Then you are an artist. Did you understand? Fancy is just putting already existing things in a new way. Primary imagination is copying something else and you are making it, but it is not that creative. A woman or man cooking from an existing recipe is primary imagination. But a woman or man making a new recipe is secondary imagination. It dissolves, diffuses, and dissipates existing things in order to recreate. Secondary imagination dissolves, diffuses, dissipates in order to recreate. Did you understand, guys? Bolina, give me 2 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes over. Now, Victorian criticism. Victorian criticism is very diverse. There was Matthew Arnold, the classical moralist, who wrote the study of poetry, which is a very important essay in essays in criticism. In study of poetry, he talks about many other writers like Wordsworth, Keats, etc. He talks about touchstone method. Touchstone method is a method of comparative criticism. He talks about personal and historical fallacies. Matlab, this writer, you are looking at one writer and saying, this writer is from my own caste. He is my own caste, my own Kerala writer. So let me appreciate him, great writer. He is from my own historical period. He is also from 20th century, 21st century. So let me appreciate him. Aise mat bolna, aise mat karna, because judging somebody based on personal reasons, historical reasons is wrong. Be objective. Understand what is a classic. Arnold said. Did you understand? And he said, great poetry should have high truth and high seriousness. Remember, Arnold said, great poetry should have high truth and high seriousness, but Chaucer did not have it. Even Chaucer he is criticizing, Matthew Arnold. And he estimated other poets also. Matthew Arnold wrote Function of Criticism at the Present Time, prefaced Poems 1853, Culture and Anarchy. Remember all these people? Then there were other people in the Victorian period, like Walter Pater, John Ruskin. Then Walter Pater, let me talk to you about one by one. What did Walter Pater write? Studies in the history of Renaissance. Studies in the history of Renaissance. His famous essays, postscript and style, on style, they are prescribed in universities. Postscript and on style. In the Victorian period, Walter Pater was associated with aestheticism, where Oscar Wilde was also an important member. Oscar Wilde wrote the essay, The Critic as Artist. The Critic as Artist is by Oscar Wilde. John Ruskin was another figure during this time. He was an art critic and literary critic as well as cultural critic. We have already talked about him in non-fiction, do you remember? Modern Painters, Seven Lamps of Architecture, Stones of Venice. These are his art critical works. John Ruskin was friends with Thomas Carlyle, and he wrote important works of cultural criticism also. One of his important works of cultural criticism is Sesame and Lilies. Sesame and Lilies is actually controversial. It has two parts, of king's gardens, of king's treasuries and of queen's gardens. It has been criticized. It is sexist, of king's treasuries and of queen's gardens. At the same time, J.S. Mill, John Stuart Mill, who was an important utilitarian philosopher, wrote Utilitarianism, The Subjection of Women, On Liberty. These are also very important works. In the Victorian period, there was Henry James. Henry James, another critic. He wrote The Art of Fiction. Remember, that is a very classic text of realism. I know that I'm going a little fast. I hope you will watch the video again and take down everything. Zoomers, people are leaving. Some people are saying, I don't want to see all this feast. I don't want to see all this sari shop, I think. Are they going to study later? I am sure they will. Percy Lubbock was a friend of Henry James. Percy Lubbock wrote The Craft of Fiction. Remember Craft of Fiction? That is where Percy Lubbock talks about what? Percy Lubbock talks about the panoramic and scenic novels. The panoramic and scenic novels. Will you remember, guys? Talk about Henry James. Realism is very important. Important realists like Thackeray. I've given here the picture of George Eliot. Henry James is important. So many important realists in America also. William Dean Howells, John W. DeForest, etc. Naturalism is an offshoot of realism. And naturalism is propounded by Emile Zola. Emile Zola, I have given here his picture. Zola's book, Nana, is a classic of naturalism. Nana is a classic of naturalism. He also wrote the experimental novel, An Essay about Naturalism. Naturalism flourished in France and America. There are many naturalist writers in America, like Jack London, Theodore Dreiser, Stephen Crane. Zoomers, YouTubers, are you following? Germinal. And then there are the avant-garde movements. One question comes from avant-garde movements. What are the avant-garde movements you should know about? Who are the important figures you should know? We have surrealism. First, we have symbolism. Baudelaire, important figure. Then Imagism, Ezra Pound and others. Then we have Expressionism, Georg Kaiser, Franz Kafka, Augustus Strindberg, Expressionism. Then we have Surrealism, Salvador Dali, Louis Buñuel, even our Dylan Thomas, And then in symbolism, there are so many others. Verlaine, Rimbaud, Valéry, Mallarmé, in symbolism. And then there is futurism. Russian futurism is there. And also Italian futurism. Filippo Marinetti is the important figure from Italy. Then Dadaism. Tristan Zara. In which book by Tom Stoppard is Tristan Zara an important figure? Bolo? In Travesties. He's a character. So avant-garde movements are very, very important. Avant-garde movements. Aestheticism. Once again, Walter Pater, Oscar Wilde, art for art's sake movement. That is what is called aestheticism. Remember? Art for art's sake movements. Then symbolism. This is Baudelaire. Once again, W.B. Yeats. Before that, William Blake. Baudelaire, Mallarmé, Proust, Valéry, Verlaine, Rimbaud. They're all French symbolists and British, European symbolists. Very, very important. Symbolism. Formalism. In literary criticism, formalism has two branches. Russian formalism and new criticism. Remember, Russian formalism came in the early 20th century. Opoyas and Moscow Linguistic Society are two important branches of Russian formalism. Very important names are Vladimir Shklovsky, Roman Jakobson, Osip Brick, Boris Tomaszewski, and Yuri Tinyanov. Do you remember all these people? These people were inspired by futurism. They believed in literariness. That means literature should not be like ordinary language. Literature is a specialized kind of language. It has a form that is important. Form subsumes content. Content is conveyed through form. That is why they are called formalists. Literariness is achieved through techniques like defamiliarization. You know, a different form that is unusual should be employed in literature. Victor Shklovsky talked about defamiliarization in art as technique. You have to resist automatization. Other techniques used by Russian formalists are foregrounding. Importance of foregrounding. Roman Jakobson talked about language. They were all linguists. He talked about metaphor and metonymy. He talked about a model for communication. Do you remember these terms? And then there were the new critics. The new critics include the practical critics. The practical critics are I.A. Richards, William Emerson, and F.R. Lewis. They are the practical critics. And then there are also the new critics of America. Who are the new critics of America? We have J.C. Ransom, Cleanth Brooks, Alan Tate. Hannah? Okay, let me ask you some questions now. I.A. Richards wrote the book Principles of Literary Criticism. When was it published? Which year? Principles of Literary Criticism, 1924. And he also wrote Practical Criticism. That is in 1929. The Meaning of Meaning by I.A. Richards was written along with C.K. Ogden. And I.A. Richards talked about 4 kinds of meaning, 2 uses of language, remember? He introduced close reading and also basic English. William Emerson talked about ambiguity. In 7 Types of Ambiguity. In which year was it published? 7 Types of Ambiguity came in 1930. Of which the most complicated is the 7th type. F.R. Lewis ran a periodical called The Scrutiny and wrote a lot of books. You must have heard of F.R. Lewis's New Bearings in English Poetry, Revaluation, The Great Tradition. Please look up the important works by F.R. Lewis. They are very important. There will be definitely a question. Who are the writers of great tradition according to F.R. Lewis? Jane Austen, George Eliot, Henry James, and Joseph Conrad. Jane Austen, George Eliot, Henry James, and Joseph Conrad. And American New Critics. Stacey Ransom wrote The New Criticism. Alan Tate wrote about tension in poetry. Cleon Brooks talked about paradox and heresy of paraphrase. Do you remember all these things? And New Criticism inspired modernism. New Criticism inspired modernism to a great extent. Okay, guys. Now, next is Chicago School. Chicago School critics are also called Neo-Aristotelians. This book, Critics and Criticism, Ancient and Modern, was their manifesto. R.S. Crane, Elder Olson, Richard McKeown, W.R. Keast, Norman MacLean, Bernard Weinberg. They are the important figures of Chicago School or Neo-Aristotelians. Then, of course, there is modernism of T.S. Eliot. Modernism that believed in blurring of distinction between genres. It believed in fragmentation. It believed in dehumanization. It believed in the internal processes of man, disbelieved in external social reality. Don't you remember all this? The Wasteland, Ulysses, oh, Mrs. Dalloway. So many important figures and examples. We have dealt with it in literature also, so we will move on a little bit. Then there are the people who are associated with the philosophy of language. What do you mean by philosophy of language? So many critics in the 20th century talked about language because in the 20th century, there was the linguistic turn. Do you remember what is linguistic turn? That means the focus on language. It started with Ferdinand de Saussure. And many people believed that language creates reality. So the linguistic turn gave importance to language. It all started with Ferdinand de Saussure and also Russian formalists like Roman Jakobson, who gave importance to language and communication. And associated with philosophy of language are critics like Vladimir Propp, who wrote Morphology of the Folktale, J.L. Austin, who talked about speech act theory, Henry Widdowson, who talked about stylistics, Ludwig Wittgenstein, who talked about language games. They're all important philosophers of language in the 20th century. Will you remember, guys? Questions will be there. Already they have asked questions on all these people. And then Shakespearean criticism. Starting from the 19th century writer, Edward Dowden. Edward Dowden wrote Shakespeare, a critical study of his mind and art, where Dowden talked about the 4 stages of Shakespearean writing, Shakespeare's oeuvre or Shakespeare's career. In the workshop, in the world, out of the depths, in the heights. Those are the 4 stages that he talked about. Then other Shakespearean critics like A.C. Bradley, who wrote Shakespearean Tragedy, Caroline Spurgeon, who wrote Shakespeare's Imagery, Ernest Jones, who wrote Hamlet and Oedipus, based on Sigmund Freud, Dover Wilson. What did he write? What happens in Hamlet? Dover Wilson. E.M.W. Tilliard, who wrote Shakespeare's History Plays. One book he wrote, where he developed the Tudor myth. Wilson Knight, who wrote The Wheel of Fire, and down to the cultural materialists and new historicists. New historicists like Stephen Greenblatt, cultural materialists like Jonathan Jollymore and Alan Sinfield. So many of them in the 80s, 1980s have written about Shakespeare and Renaissance. You should look that up. Then genre criticism. Criticism about genres like Bakhtin, Henry James, Ian Watt. All of them wrote about novel. Percy Lubbock. Percy Lubbock wrote Craft of Fiction. Aspects of the novel by E.M. Foster. Art of Fiction and Art of the Novel, both by Henry James. Ian Watt wrote Rise of the Novel. Martin Esslin, also genre critic. He wrote about drama. Isn't it? They're all important genre critics. Then there is myth criticism or archetypal criticism. Archetypal criticism or myth criticism focuses on underlying archetypes of literature. Northrop Frye, Maud Botkin are important critics of the 1950s. Before that, James Fraser, Carl Jung, they are predecessors. James Fraser wrote The Golden Bough. Jesse Western wrote From Ritual to Romance. Carl Jung wrote about collective unconscious. They are all predecessors of myth criticism. Northrop Frye, they might ask, Northrop Frye talked about archetypes of literature. Remember, Northrop Frye, Canadian critic. There are also other contemporary critics, including some of the, the Marxists, the post-colonialists, the feminists. They're also critics. They will ask about René Wellek, critics that they ask about in net. René Wellek, they will ask about F.L. Lucas, J.L. Loves, Lionel Trilling, Kenneth Burke, then M.H. Abrams. You should look up these writers. Frank Kermode, David Lodge. They're all contemporary critics. I have talked about them. I taught about them in my paid classes, but I'm sharing it with you. These names are very important. Please look up. Wow, I exceeded my time. So sorry, guys. That's all for today. But now there is rapid fire. Today's rapid fire is handled by Sethu Lakshmi, I think. Are you there, Sethu? Yes. I will just make you the co-host. You may please unmute yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So I hope everybody enjoyed. It was rather hectic, right?
Yes.
Sethu?
Yes. I was listening to the... Yes.
They must be tired, right?
But I don't know, because you mentioned about contemporary critics and yes, frequently asked critics.
Yes, you can't avoid all
Especially
this.
Frank Kermode. I remember every year they used to ask one question from Frank Kermode.
So let us, without wasting their time, quickly give them the questions, Sethu. Sorry. Yeah. Who is the author? Oh, sorry. Sethu, please read.
Here is the first question. Who is the author of a philosophical inquiry into the origin of ideas of the sublime and the beautiful. Option A, Edmund Burke. Option B, Longinus. Option C, Immanuel Kant. Yes.
Your connection is not
Answers
that
are
great,
coming.
Setu. We could not hear you properly.
Can't hear me? Am I audible?
We couldn't hear you completely.
Okay.
It's okay because the question is there. They must have understood.
Okay.
We mentioned it in the lecture also.
Many are saying the right answer. Yes, it's option A.
The right answer is?
It's option A, Edmund Burke.
Yes. Next.
Next question, which of the following is not a source of sublimity according to Longinus? Which of the following is not a source of sublimity according to Longinus? Option A, great thoughts. Option B, strong feelings. And option C, noble diction.
Not a source of sublimity. Let us look at the answer.
Yes, it's option B, strong feelings. It's the right answer, guys. Yes.
Nobility of thought, vehement passion actually means strong feelings. Vehement passion. Okay. Out of the three, okay, maybe. But if I am a teacher and not thinking about exam, I would say this is also correct. Because strong feelings is what is vehement passion. Anyway, next. There will be such confusions in net anyway. Next question.
Third question. Who said that poetry should at once delight and instruct the reader? Option A, Aristotle. Option B, Plato. And option C, Horace.
And the answer is?
And the answer is option C, Horace. Yes.
Yeah, he gave a lot of importance to delight as well as instruction, which was actually unlike a classical critic. Next.
Next question. Among the following, identify that which is not true about Aristotle's views on poetry and tragedy. Option A, poetry should instruct, evoking pleasure is corrupting. Option B, catharsis purges human beings.
Slowly.
Okay. Option B, catharsis purges human beings of extreme emotions. And option C, tragedy should evoke pity and fear.
Which of the following is not true about Aristotle's views on poetry and tragedy? Take your time and answer. Does he say poetry should instruct and evoking pleasure is corrupting? Or does he say catharsis purges human beings of emotions, extreme emotions? Tragedy should evoke pity and fear. If you read one more time, it is easy.
Yes. Option A, poetry should instruct, evoking pleasure is corrupting.
That's wrong. Aristotle supported evoking pleasure. Next.
Next question. Philip Sidney wrote an apology for poetry as a reply to another work that denounced theatre and plays. Identify the work. Is it option A, John Dryden's dramatic poesy, or option B, Stephen Gozon's Theatre of Abuse, or option C, Stephen Gozon's School of Abuse?
Ta-da-dang. People know that, I'm sure.
Yes.
It is.
Option C, Stephen Gozon's School of Abuse.
Yes. Next.
Next question. Which of the following is not a criticism addressed by Philip Sidney in his Apology for Poetry? Option E, poetry is the mother of lies. Option B, tragedy is inherently superior to poetry and hence poetry is useless. Option C, Plato has rightly banished poets from his ideal commonwealth. Some are saying option A, some are saying option B.
Not a criticism addressed by Philip Sidney.
Yes, option B is the right answer. Tragedy is inherently superior to poetry and hence poetry is useless.
Next question.
Next question. An essay of dramatic poesy by John Dryden was published in the year dash. Is it 1666? Or is it 1667? Or is it 1668?
The answer is
1668, option C.
okay. Next.
Next question. It's a pretty long question. I mean, options are pretty long. Yeah. Why did Neander, in an essay of dramatic poesy, support English theatre? Option A, because the support of regality proved that it is innately good. Option B, because of its subplots, mixture of mirth and tragedy, as in tragicomedy, and spirited multiple characters. Or option C, because it has a better tradition of exploring the spectacular on the stage.
Why did Neander support English theatre? Because the support of regality means what? Because the royal people supported it, so it must be good. Because of its subplots, mixing mirth and tragedy, mixing happiness and tragedy. Because of spirited multiple characters, all that is good. And option C, it has a better tradition of exploring the spectacle on stage. Answer is
option B, because of its subplots, mixture of mirth and tragedy, as in tragicomedy, and spirited multiple characters.
That means Neander supported, look at the question, Neander supported English theatre because option B, it's subplots, mixing of tragedy and comedy, and spirited multiple characters. Guys, these are all anti-classical elements, but Neander supported it. Got it? Now.
Next question. Which of the following is not true about Wordsworth's conception of poetry? Option A, the language of poetry should be lofty and should follow classical diction. Option B, the subject of poetry should be the humble and rustic life. Or option C, the common subject matter should be dealt with the coloring of imagination.
Which of these is not true?
Yes, right answer. Option A, the language of poetry should be lofty and should follow classical diction.
Oh, that is the neoclassical idea, which Wordsworth resisted, or he was against it. Wordsworth said that there is essentially no difference between the language of poetry and the language of prose.
Next question. In which chapter of Biographia Literaria did Coleridge introduce the distinction between primary and secondary imagination? Option A, chapter 10, option B, chapter 14, or option C, chapter 13. Yes, the right answer is option C, chapter 13. Next question. Who among the following called Dryden the father of English criticism? Option A, Matthew Arnold, option B, John Ruskin, or option C, Samuel Johnson.
Who called Dryden the father of English criticism?
Yes, option C, Samuel Johnson. Next question. What is negative capability according to John Keats? Option A, the inability of the poets to explore artistic emotions objectively. Option B, it is the defining feature of prose. Or option C, it is the ability of the poets to pursue a particular artistic vision, even if it leads to uncertainty than reason and intellectual surety.
Did you understand, guys? What is negative capability? The inability of the poets to explore artistic emotions. It is a defining feature of prose. It is the ability of the poets to pursue a particular artistic vision, even if it leads to uncertainty. A poet is able to say something, even though he is not sure about it. Which of these is negative capability?
Yes. Option C, it is the ability of the poets to pursue a particular artistic vision, even if it leads to uncertainty than reason and intellectual surety.
Did you get that, guys?
Next question. Which romantic poet wrote a reply to Thomas Love Peacock's The Four Ages of Poetry? Option A, P.B. Shelley. Option B, John Keats. Or option C, Coleridge.
Answer is?
Option A, P.B. Shelley. Right answer,
That's
guys.
right.
Yes. Next question. What are the two modes of human understanding according to Shelley? Option A, the rational and the irrational. Option B, the rational and the imaginative. Or option C, the creative and the objective.
The two modes of human understanding according to Shelley are?
Option B, the rational and the imaginative.
Yes.
Next question. The preface to the lyrical ballads was published in the year? Option A, 1798. Option B, 1789. Or option C, 1800. The preface. Option C, 1800. Yes, right answer.
Next.
Next question. Who among the following lacks high seriousness according to Matthew Arnold? Option A, Homer and Sophocles. Option B, Goethe and Wordsworth. Or option C, Chaucer and Burns. Yes, many are saying the right answer.
That's right. This is tremendous practice for them. The answer. Who among the following lacks high seriousness according to Arnold? It is?
Option C, Chaucer and Burns. Next question. Who among the following is not associated with the dictum art for art's sake? Option A, Walter Pater. Option B, Theophile Gautier. Option C, John Ruskin.
Not associated with art for art's sake.
Yes, option C, John Ruskin. Right answer. Yes. Next question. Among the following, identify the alternative title of A View of the English Stage by William Hazlitt. Option A, a series of dramatic criticisms. Option B, an exercise in dramatic criticisms. Or option C, the art of English theatre.
The alternative title of A View of the English Stage by William Hazlitt.
The right answer is option A, a series of dramatic criticisms. Yes, option A.
A series of dramatic criticisms is by William Hazlitt. It is also called A View of the English Stage.
Next question. Who said the following? Shakespeare is above all writers, at least above all modern writers, and the poet of nature, the poet that holds a poet of nature, the poet that holds up his readers a faithful mirror of manners and of life. Option A, John Dryden. Option B, Samuel Johnson. Or option C, A.C. Bradley.
This famous quote, I'm sure you know. Shakespeare is above all writers, a poet of nature.
Option B, Samuel Johnson. Next question. Which of the following is not true about T.S. Eliot's discussion of poetry? Poets should have a historical sense. Poetry should be impersonal. Or poets should break free of the influence of past writers. What could be the answer?
The answer is?
Poets should break free of the influence of past writers.
And that is the end of today's rapid fire. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Setu.
Everyone.
Did you enjoy, Setu?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
I'm sure everybody enjoyed. So I hope you will do your homework. I hope you will read extra on everything that we have covered. And it is bye-bye from Setu and me.
Good night.
We'll come back tomorrow with literary theory questions.